Thank you, Rebecca. One more. Thank you. It is tough to teach the after-dinner crowd, so lunch was enjoyable, and that was to get you pumped up and ready. So, welcome on behalf of the Commonwealth. We appreciate the opportunity to speak today and talk a little bit about our path in pushing information forward with technology and the culmination of Lifelines as we know that today. So, there'll be a short quiz based on the slides that you saw. They only flashed like a portion of a second each, and we'll start the quiz off right now. So, I'm sorry, wait a minute, I'm getting a call from Sheldon. I think he wants his royalties. I'm here team teaching with Doug Eades. He's our IT lead, invaluable in where we've gone for the past 6 years. We're also here with Eric Indelot. Eric is the wizard and the man behind the magic that we do. Eric also constructed that video, so thank you. So the first part of the quiz goes something like this. Kentucky's famous for two things. I'll give you those answers. We're famous for the fastest 2 minutes in sports, the Kentucky Derby, Louisville. I actually live in Louisville. I commute to Frankfort, where our state EOC is, and I had the distinct pleasure of not watching the Derby for 29 consecutive years because I worked the Derby. It's not a good task to work the Derby, but after that, I enjoyed the sights and the sounds. I can tell you that as law enforcement, you know, we're busy, and it's a crowd of 150,000 plus. I had never sampled a mint julep, and for those who have, good for you, because I didn't like it at all the first one I got after that 30 years. So we're also famous for bourbon. I mean, any bourbon, Woodford Reserve, Four Roses, I mean, it just goes on and on. Pappy Van Winkle. What do we think a bottle of Pappy goes for? $1,600. No, actually it goes for about $600. What do you think a shot of 25-year-old Pappy goes for? $2,000 an ounce. Anyways, we're famous for that, so here's the quiz question. We don't price it, folks. We don't price it. So here's the first question in the quiz. What's the most popular Kentucky activity that has 2 times the number of our population? Any guesses? None being heard, okay? You don't get that first drink. The answer is our bourbon that is aging in the state of Kentucky. Our population is, and in Kentucky, we just round numbers. We're not a big math state. We round numbers, so our population is 4.5 million. Guess how many barrels of bourbon we have aging? 8.1 million barrels of bourbon aging, so that is 2.0 barrels per person. We may have a problem. So we're proud of our bourbon history, quite frankly, and it has experienced a resurgent, even with the tariffs. We're doing well there. So we want to talk to you a little bit today about the evolution, and that's what this whole summit has been. And thank you to our partners, first NAPSG, the NIC, FEMA, DHS, S&T, CUSEC, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Thanks to all our partners. This has been a 6-year transition into where we are today. We're excited and we're still moving forward. So we'll talk to you a little bit about where we've began and where we're at now. It's all about the partnerships. We all know that. It doesn't matter what part of emergency services you're from, it's all about the partnerships. It's to be able to say, hey, listen, I was at NAPSG in Galveston, and you know, my name is Mike, and we've met and we've talked about that. So that's part of the great thing about the partnerships. So Kentucky's Big Bang started in 1987, almost 30 years ago. I round a lot. And we began actually a project with FEMA and CUSEC that looked at putting an information structure together that we could pass on through 8 states. Didn't go so well. We morphed into several banner events, NLE 11, 14, CAPSTONE, and then the New Madrid. We'll talk a little bit about that. So this is our introduction. How many of our folks know or have been acquainted with CUSEC? Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium. I am privileged and honored to be the chairman of our board. I've been that for 2+ years. We're technology based. We built CUSEC as an operational piece to this whole puzzle. We're not policy based. We have moved forward for 30 years, quite frankly, in the information area. So the members of CUSEC in alphabetical order are Alabama, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Mississippi, and the great state of Tennessee. Patrick Sheehan is a good friend of mine. We text. And also South Carolina and Oklahoma have served as our associate states. So you have 8 core states, you have 10 affiliate states, and then we're looking at joining forces with our other consortiums across the country just for operational purposes. So the first thing we did of note was the National Level Exercise 2011. That occurred in May of 2011. I was actually there during that time working in the logistics end of it. We scripted a remarkable test of the plans that we wrote. And I'll be frank with you, before 2011, if you ask any of our member states, where's your policy on a major earthquake event, you wouldn't have received a whole lot. So 2011 was all about building the plan. It went well. We did some exceptional throughput with information sharing. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're from the common operating picture side or you're on the situational awareness side, which came before, which one do you use? It's in our vocabulary, sometimes they're synonymous. So we struggled with how we want to get information out. CAPSTONE 2014 was in June of 14. This was an opportunity to test the plans. We did that and we had some good results. If you're looking for AARs, you can find them on the CUSEC website. A lot of good work occurred in 8 states. A lot of hard planning. And that brings us forward to Shake and Fury 2019. We've got a lot to tell you about Shake and Fury. Quite frankly, that was about a 2-year process. We started in late 16, which morphed into 17, looking at the plans with a finite purpose. We looked at them by region. There are 4 regions involved in CUSEC states. So Gracia Sheck, those of you who know Gracia, she's a dear friend, and I've nominated her many times for Administrator of the Year. They've not awarded it yet because they don't do that, but the long and the short of it is, Gracia is remarkable in organizing. Region 4 has the largest throughput, with the exception of the great state of Texas and the 1 star. Region 4 has the most disasters by far, and they have throughout history. So a lot of planning takes place in Region 4. We actually received a FEMA funded planner for the planning for Shake and Fury. That went on for 2 years. We codified the plans. I will tell you that once FEMA rolled up the plan for our states in Region 4, it was 2 inches thick. Now there were 3 other FEMA regions, so what do you have when you stack all of those plans together? You have a phone book. It's extraordinarily sophisticated. So Shake and Fury was an opportunity to test that, and we did well, a whole lot of things to come. So this takes us back to 2011. Any guardsmen in here? I'm asking if you remember SWET-MS. SWET-MS was the most horrific game playing that we have ever adopted in the emergency management format. It was not good. I can remember as a logistician and as an area manager, I would get these graphs to fill in our SWET-MS. And it says, what's the status of your schools? Are they open and closed? How in the world am I going to know whether my state's schools are open and closed when they don't make the decision until a few hours beforehand? So it was not a good tool. and it measured sewer, water, electric, transportation, medical, and schools. So you're going to see a little bit of the throughput into Lifelines. Not much here with SWET-MS, but it was good for the time. We moved on. Enter the National Exercise 2011, and Doug will walk us through the technology.
All right, so what we're doing is we're really talking about kind of the evolution of the technology that we use to report these lifelines. And so you think about, well, lifelines have only been out for about 2 or 3 years, but we've really been reporting something very similar to lifelines. You know, we started out with SWET-MS, okay, and so what we're talking about here on this slide is how we actually input that information. How many of you remember old WebEOC? The old WebEOC, all right? It's even so old that it's black and white, right? And that purple color, all right? And so what we did at that time is we actually came up with, you know, the SWET-MS, those different metrics that we were using at that time, and we had to come into the system, had to log into WebEOC, and then you would see something that, you know, had a flex viewer over to the side. So we were trying to take WebEOC, we were trying to take that mechanism of loading up those statuses, and we were trying to get that over to a map. Well, you know, what we had at the time is basically we had a set of custom scripts that would actually log into the front end of WebEOC, would go to that board, pull the information out, close WebEOC, and then take and publish it over to a feature service, and it was just so clunky. Remember, we're talking 8 years ago. The technology wasn't there. There was no ArcGIS Online. There wasn't anything like that at the time to be able to do it. And how many of you remember FlexViewer? Okay, FlexViewer, yeah. FlexViewer is dead. Long live Flex, right? You know, the Adobe Flash. No, it's not dead. No, it's not dead. But you know, we were using FlexViewer, and this is when we first started to think about something called Virtual USA. Okay, and the big project started out on the northwest coast, carried over into the south central United States, where we could basically take data and we could share it between servers. Now, it wasn't cloud-based per se. It wasn't that ArcGIS Online. It was kind of a precursor to Esri's ArcGIS Online. Thank you, Esri. But it was a way that you could permission your feature services and you could share information. So if you could get that information from WebEOC into some type of a feature service on your local server, then you could permission it through Virtual USA. So now, the next step, the next evolutionary step brings us up to CAPSTONE 14.
So for CAPSTONE 14, we introduced EEIs. We've all heard about EEIs. We know how many EEIs we have approximately now. Well, CUSEC did a vote, and these were by virtue of our state directors. We're in the executive group, and we started out with 26 EEIs. How would you like to have looked at that list and had to move through those reams of data, and this is not electronic or virtual at this point. We're pushing information on 26 EEIs. Not doable, so we decided to move forward. We reduced them to 18. 18, still too big of a lift. As we move forward, and this is up to the CAPSTONE 14 exercise, we decided on 7. And the 7 remain constant today.
So with Virtual USA in CAPSTONE 14, what we were able to do is we were able to push Virtual USA a little bit further than what we had in the past. We were able to use ArcGIS Online at the time, basically taking that next evolutionary step where you could get a broader picture. I remember during CAPSTONE 14, 5 years ago, that quite a few folks were still using FlexViewer. And then some folks had started to make the move over to ArcGIS Online. And Mike said, you know, you think about 26 EEIs. Can you imagine the GIS and IT folks in the room when the directors came back with 26 EEIs? And how do we get that across 8 states? And how do we share that across those 8 states?
No.
Right, that's right. And so then, you know, as he said, we brought that down to 18, or the directors brought it down to 18. And then what can we chew on a day-to-day basis, on a blue sky basis? We settled on 7. That anytime you go to our portal through CUSEC, you'll see those 7 EEIs living there and being reported on. With the big picture, now it allowed us to reach out and start touching the private sector and the business sector a little bit more. And Mike's going to talk about that through the Virtual Business Emergency Operations Center.
So The private sector is near and dear to our hearts and mine in particular. At that time, this was immediately after Kentucky's largest disaster. Now, I realize, folks, we have some states out there that get into the billions. Kentucky experiences a flooding disaster about 2.5 times a year. We're surrounded on 3 sides by water, have the largest number of navigable miles in Conus, only second to Alaska. Google it, please. The long and the short of it is we had come off of our largest disaster in 2009, and that involved an ice storm, a catastrophic ice storm. We had 112 counties declared. We were out of touch with the western part of our state for 1 week. Didn't quite know how bad the damage was. So we're recovering from that, and the director at the time turns to me and he says, wow, can't do this anymore. We delivered heater meals and MREs off of the back of Humvees to homes, individual homes in subdivisions. Every National Guardsman and airman in the state was activated for that disaster. We pushed up close to $400 million. The long and the short of it is we learned a severe lesson. We learned that you have to have private sector and you have to have a supply chain to be resilient and to come through a disaster like that. Our TAG at the time actually was asked to come to Congress and tell folks, how did we survive that disaster? How did we deliver resources? And I can tell you from being in the EOC, there was a cadre of maybe 50 people that worked literally 24 hours a day. They didn't go home. They didn't get time off. They crashed in an office somewhere and slept on the floor, and that's how we got through it. Folks, that's a bad recipe. We learned from that. We created, and fortunately the director handed it off to me at the time, and he says, start a private sector group. So what was born was the virtual BEOC, one of the first in the nation. New Jersey had one, New York had one, Louisiana was coming on, but for the central states, only Kentucky was starting this. I have a good friend, only by phone. I've not met him. Mike Schumer is a doctor with the New Jersey Institute of Technology, NJIT. I ended up cold calling Mike because his name come across an email that I was copied on. I said, hey, Mike, I understand that you have an active virtual BEOC. And he's going, yeah. I said, we're trying to gear up and start one here. He spends 2 hours out of his day. He don't know me from anybody. I'm just a guy calling saying, hey, we'd like to talk about private sector. He took the time, he gave us some guidance and some tips. We formed our VBOC because in our EOC, I'm very fortunate. I live in the house that FEMA built. Kentucky is the last CSEP state, the chemical stockpile state. So we had funding that we could put toward an EOC. So I live in a $15 million building. Then we lived in a room that seated 30 people. That's it. So we didn't have room for private sector. So we used a VBOC. We did all things virtual. It worked out really well, and we have moved forward in that concept. And to this day, we leverage that in all events.
So from the technology side of bringing together ArcGIS Online, Esri at that time, and all the different platforms that we had through WebEOC, through the Flex Viewer still. As you can tell in the upper left-hand corner, that was a Flex Viewer showing damage assessments that we were doing during CAPSTONE 14. Lower right-hand corner shows the old operations dashboard, if you remember that you had to have it on your system, on your computer. If you wanted it to be more than one screen, you really had to have it on your system. But it still gave us that basic ability of what we were looking for, kind of those early stages of Lifelines. What's going on locally? Where's the damage? What's going on? And how can you roll that information up? Mutual aid. This is where we were partnering up with EMAC as a state. We were partnering with EMAC to try to develop mission-ready packages. Really kind of a cool feature, basically to be able to kind of pre-stage different packages and different resources and to be able to identify those based on the ESF type. To see what status they were in at the time. Either they were deployed or they were ready to go or they had already been deployed or they couldn't be deployed. We have, in the upper left-hand corner, we showed resources that were being delivered by state. So we took the icons from different states, And we could see where, so if you had teams from Illinois that were operating in Tennessee, you could see how many teams you had down there. So once again, just being able to bring it into Flex, being able to bring it into custom-built solutions, a solution that G&H built called the VISE in the lower right-hand corner that worked really well on iPads at the time. That dashboard, once again, just a different view of those mission-ready packages and seeing where they were and kind of where they were being deployed, what the status were they available, were they not available, kind of what's going on with those. This was our first attempt at the power outage situation. At the time, we weren't happy with Eagle Eye and kind of the turnaround time it gave us. So we were actually tracking power back in 2014 based on WebEOC status. Just log into WebEOC, tell us what your status is, and we'll take and push it out to a featured service. Road closures, once again, bringing that into some type of a flex viewer for that time. You know, as you see, we're starting to kind of progress toward the current community lifelines. What's going on with different statuses that were identified. Man, this was painful. We had all the counties, 120 counties, we had all the counties in the state logging into WebEOC, and they were reporting off of those 18 EEIs. Okay, and they had to go in and click each one, what's your status, give us, you know, the information about it. It was painful because they had to log in, time and time again. And then try to make sense out of this chiclet chart. Now we did have WebEOC Fusion going, Web Fusion, so we were able to get a visibility across multiple states. At that time, we were able actually to get that technology really close on what we wanted to do with it, which brings us up to Shake and Fury 2019.
So did anybody feel our pain with the chiclet chart? Of course you did. So that brings us to Shake and Fury 2019, and quite frankly, this is where Lifelines is born for Kentucky and for the CUSEC states. Any folks here that participated in Shake and Fury? Great, very good, and thank you. So here's a shot of the Kentucky State EOC. At times during Shake and Fury, we had 200 folks in our EOC. We have breakout rooms all along the side, second floors on both sides. We're very fortunate. When we built, we moved our jock into the building, so our Tier 1 partner, the National Guard, is sitting right there with us. There's no phone call, there's no fax. He or she is sitting right at my side in the command module, and we are linked, so it works very well. The long and the short of it is, we had over 100 agencies participate in the EOC. We had about 200 folks across the multiple 8-state area. We got good throughput. To talk about the partnerships, I'm chairing a meeting for the exercise. You can see Dan Kanuski. Next to him is Gracious Sheck. Next to him is our National Guard lead for the Joint Forces Headquarters. You can see Ron over there next to my state trooper there. It's a partnership. This whole thing revolved on knowing each other's first names. So fast forward into the community lifelines, and how did we leverage that for the exercise? Kentucky, early on, I put up my hand and I said, hey, CUSEC, we were the planning state for all 8 CUSEC states. Everybody sent folks to Franklin, Tennessee. We went to Franklin, Tennessee so many times to meet with Josh Dozier, who was planning the exercise for FEMA, that we had rooms there. We should have had name tags on the hotel rooms. It was a great effort. FEMA did a great job, and Josh's crew was second to none. It was a well-planned exercise. Of course, it happened in January, a 7.7 response. The CUSEC area will look like a third world country. Memphis will be ground zero, which interestingly enough is the office for CUSEC. Figure that one out, folks. I've asked, they said, hey, Tennessee was giving it away for $1, so we took the office. CUSEC was formed in 1984, but I'm asking Jim Wilkinson, as our current executive director, and I'm asking him to get pre-warned so he can leave the area. So the bottom line is we began the process of pushing the data together across 8 states. And I volunteered as the beta state. We had a room in my EOC where Doug and his cadre, we had Wayne Truax was the lead for integrating WebEOC into Lifelines. Everybody was there, and quite frankly, they were coding on the fly. we would run up against a problem to get the data from the county to the state, then over the wall into FEMA, up to the NRCC, first the RRCC, then the NRCC. They fixed it on the fly right there in that room. We filmed some of it. It was magic. It was just something to watch that may never occur again. That's the type of success that we were fortunate. So that brings us to what is now known as the RISP, the Regional Information Sharing Portal. You can see the partnerships that we have here. It started out as the RCOP, the Regional Common Operating Picture. So I ask you, chicken or egg? Is it Common Operating Picture? Is it situational awareness? Does it really matter? No, it's how we share information. It's agnostic. It is a system of systems. It takes all comers. It doesn't matter whether it's state. It doesn't matter whether it's federal or local. We built the RISP to help us get the data into the Lifeline process and up to FEMA. So we ran into a little snag while we were pushing the data. FEMA wasn't quite ready and was prohibited from throwing the last switch that would enable a seamless process. So we had analysts in Tennessee and Kentucky that hand jammed the data. Now we all realize in the real world, we don't have time to hand jam anything. But this, for test purposes, did work. We did the input. It went up to the NRCC. We actually did the VTC call in the Kentucky EOC with DC. Dan was there. All of the participants were on the call, and it worked very well. So this is a dashboard that looks at Gas Buddy. Everybody that's used Gas Buddy data in an event. It is priceless. So we incorporated, by permission, Gas Buddy data. And this was notional data that we plugged in by virtue of what the damage was. And we have moved that several pegs farther down the line since Shake and Fury. But this is the benefit of data sharing and then moving it up and out toward 8 states. This graphic shows trending. When we're reporting up to Region 4 and then ultimately up the line to the NRCC, and Lifelines revolves around, and we all know this, it revolves around the status of your stabilization, and then it revolves around what are your needs. So we do red, yellow, green, gray is unknown. All of this gears up to, are you increasing, are you decreasing in risk and need? So this is an explanation of how Gas Buddy worked.
So as you can see from that last graphic across the top, you start to see those lifelines being listed in tabular form across the top, and just another way of displaying those lifelines. This was a use of Survey 123, once again on the safety and security side, doing assessments of homes and feeding it into a dashboard. One thing, if you notice here, this was a QSEC dashboard that was being fed out through the RISP. This dashboard is fed out through KYM. So we were able to take other folks' dashboards, other folks' information, bringing it into our own dashboard that we used during the exercise. One of the things that's important is to be able to get the information not just in a graphical format, but also to be able to get it into a printed format. So while we were in the dashboards, you could actually go to a section, and if you were looking for mission requests, we were actually tasking mission requests based on the community Lifeline Association. So this is a safety and security one that was created out of TEMA. Once again, just showing the energy lifeline across all the states. We had the gas side of it. This is the electrical side of it, and we were tracking by looking at the forward-facing power outage maps and bringing that data all in and aggregating it. Once again, showing kind of the rise and fall of it and what it was doing across the states. On a state level for community lifelines, we still had counties set up in WebEOC to where they could come in and they could report their status of their lifeline. So that is something that we're still working on, maybe streamlining that process and then getting it into even a little bit more modern looking chiclet chart. One of the things as we start to wrap up that we did with our ESF partners, as we were getting over several hundred injects over the course of the exercise, we assigned those injects to different ESF partners as a task. But then we also associated a community lifeline with each specific inject. So this is a dashboard that we built that pulled out of WebEOC as we were taking phone calls, and we could see what was going on with the different types of lifelines and how many injects were being assigned. And so really when you think about that evolution, starting with NLE 11, the technology there, and then the technology with CAPSTONE 14, and wrapping up with Shake and Fury 19, we think we've come a long way. Mike?
So we're looking forward to the next big bang with Esri as our partner and WebEOC and all the technologists that have contributed to where we've gone. This is all beta. We're willing to share, we're willing to take on new partners, and we certainly appreciate everybody that's contributed to this process. We have proven that the process ahead is driven by people, by data, and by technology. I personally believe we've already got enough technology. That's my personal belief. We need to leverage the technology in areas that were exhibited by Shake and Fury, and we can move the marker down the road. I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you both very much, Director Dossett and Doug Eades. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. So I believe Charlotte has a microphone. Any questions from folks? We have one right up here up front. Don't be shy. All questions are good.
Former Director Munkin from Illinois said that no questions is a sign of superior briefing. Right?
This looks awesome. When do we get, is there, I guess this is a FEMA S&T question, that all 52 states and territories get in line with this? It looks like this is a huge coordination piece, and I know, states are states, but this, to have a national map like this.
It's possible today. Again, it's in beta form, and we've heard from our FEMA partners today. They're working on dashboards that are coming our way. They're in development. It's not an overnight process. We spent decades getting to where we are now of dysfunctionality, of paper product and hand jamming, and now it all has to be automated. I don't have the personnel, you don't have the personnel. Our partners are helping us do that, so we welcome all, and I can speak for CUSEC specifically, we welcome all partners. You can be an affiliate agency or state simply by virtue of sending us an email, and I'll vet it through the board of directors. But this is an opportunity to move the peg down the road, albeit it's temporary. Shake and Fury proved we can do it. The technology's there. We pulled all the partners together. We pushed all of the Lifelines data up to the NRCC, and then we received feedback back on the VTC calls. So it's happening now. We've jumped over the hurdles. There are many, many more nights before we sleep.
And let me encourage you to go to CUSEC.org, 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 and you can see all the tools that we displayed here. You can see them there.
We actually have a storyboard up there that explains the entire process we went through.
And hats off to Ron Langhelm and DHS S&T for helping drive this. It wouldn't have been possible through those 3 big exercises without their support.
Could not have done it. We actually signed.
You can give me that $20 now?
I know.
No.
I
I want to comment real quick on the S&T side. So S&T's investment has been in CUSEC, and building CUSEC up and then supporting Shake and Fury. All of this effort has been focused there. But ideally, all of those tools have been designed and developed in a way to push them out across the country to anybody that wants them. So CUSEC is working on a plan to kind of embrace that and share that out. But this is not a virtual USA type of a project. So it's very different as far as the delivery goes. But Mike and his affiliation with CUSEC, that's the point of contact. And if folks are interested in this in other states, other EOCs, counties, whatever.
And we could not have come this far in any sense without the support of our federal partners, in particular DHS S&T. This is free for the taking, folks. We offer it at no charge. You may join and use the tools, post your own data feeds. They're all protected, so we'd certainly love to see new partners.
Thank you very much to Director Dossett and Doug. We don't have any time for more questions right now, but I believe you'll be around for the remainder of today and into tomorrow. I know Doug will be here as well. A couple things that I wanted to mention because you know, Ron came up here to announce kind of, this is a really amazing kind of model and practice to be able to replicate. And when I first started learning about it a few years ago and have watched it evolve, I'm like, the power of partnerships here is really impressive, as well as the governance model that they've stood up. And it's rare that we see a model that works as well as it works and gets the right people together under the right agreements and everything. And so that's one of the reasons why we invited them to come and share this with us, and we're really honored to have that here. I also want to highlight the integration and preparedness efforts that it represents. The fact that they're using it from the planning through the exercising, they're exercising using the same tools that they would use in operations. And I think that's also really poignant for everybody to take into consideration as we go through. That's that link in terms of preparedness, right? Because we fight like we train like we fight, right, at the end of the day. And what you've accomplished in that is outstanding, and it's a really exceptional model for us to look at in other regions, and even an intrastate region. So thank you both very much. Appreciate it.